Hello everyone, my name is Juan Pomareda. I am Peruvian. I am First Secretary of the Foreign Service of Peru, and I'm currently working at the Permanent Mission of Peru at Geneva. It's an honor to be part of this 7th World Water Summit, and I would like to thank Dr. Anil Garg for his invitation to this presentation. Today's presentation will be part of my dissertation thesis that I presented to obtain the Master in Arts in International and Contemporary Diplomacy at the University of Malta, which I presented last year. This investigation was about preparing the basis for an indicator framework for analyzing all international water interactions. I hope this fragment of this dissertation, which is based on the relation between conflict and cooperation in water management, will be helpful for understanding how the international water management is currently being settled in the world. My presentation will be based in the three main areas. The first is to talk about the historic and academic interests of water relations. Then I will talk about how the conflict is considered in water interactions, and finally I will make a brief analysis between the interactions between conflict and cooperation in international water management to determine whether the water is a driver for cooperation or for conflict. Actually, this was one of my main interest when studying and reviewing all this information, because all the time when I was learning about international relations, I was said that the future wars will be about water, and that was something that made me curious about this, because it has major implications for the world. So for starting, I would like to express that historically the water has been part of the interest of human history and have captured academic attention since the rise of international relations studies. This is because not only the water is present in all parts of the world, but it has a very unique nature, because as a model resource that flows through repairing states, it introduces concepts of sovereignty. It's based on power asymmetries. It also includes national interests. So it makes a really proper space that offers opportunity for create new adaptations, create relations between states, but also it represents some challenges and disagreements and could drive to conflicts. So that's why water was studied by international relations, and it led to the development of new academic discipline called hydrodiplomacy. The hydrodiplomacy that actually focused on international politics related to interactions in transboundary basins was a mixture of different disciplines that were studying already water-related issues like international relations, but also disciplines merging like social science and environmental science, as hydrology, environmental engineering, geology, geography. This mixture of social science and environmental science has a holistic analysis of interactions that relate to water international management among repairing countries. So it offers a very complete explanation of the water interactions. The debate around transboundary water centers on whether they led to conflict of cooperation, as I said before. So in that analysis, there are three main strands that explains explains how the water interact within the countries. So either the water can be a trigger for conflict, or water could be a stimulus for cooperation, or water could be both a source for conflict and cooperation. This is very complex because each interaction has its own context, its own characteristics, but somehow there are being studies that could explain a long range if the water has been a driver for cooperation or for conflict, as mentioned. So let's make a brief global review of water cooperation, and I will just like to bring to the table the United Nations The UNC and the UNESCO, both they are the co-custodians of SDG indicator number, the number 6.5.2 related to transboundary water management. They count that 60% of the world's fresh waters flows, and 153 countries have territory within at least one of the 286 transboundary rivers and lake basins, and also 592 transboundary aquifer systems. That means that the large part of the world are covered by transboundary basins. But at the same time, only 32 countries have 90% or more of the transboundary basin area covered by operational agreements, and only 24 countries have all their basins covered. That means that even though there are a lot of treaties and agreements between riparian countries about water, there's still a lot of space for implementing new agreements and enforcing the currently set agreement, because there's a lack geographical coverage, depth, specificity, and in general they tend to be very general in scope, and they don't consider the basin as a whole in most of the cases. So, passing to talk about water conflict. As mentioned before, water resources are integral to various human activities, and their usage can potentially lead to conflict in specific contexts. This is because, as mentioned before, water's unique attribute or characteristic of mobility introduce some conflicted potentiality because it flows through national borders, intersecting with concepts of sovereignty, poverty, property, also national interest, which is the most valuable thing about foreign policy in most nations. So let's talk what is considered to be water conflict regarding transboundary water. In the investigation I made, transboundary water conflict involves disagreements among riparian states encompassing various forms of hostility, including verbal, economic, military, and violent conflict. And what has been the role of water in armed conflicts? As we can review in different conflicts around the world, water has been used as a tool and objective in armed conflicts, strategically impacting military position and affecting civilian populations. There are a lot of examples around the world that highlight water's role in armed conflict, including destruction of water installations, dam capture, and poisoning of water resources. So also, when we talk about water and the potentiality of conflict, we should also take a look to the population growth, coupled with water shortage and the quality of the water, which mostly concerns and can escalate into armed conflicts. There are very, as I said before, a lot of examples, just to mention some of them. The cases of Syria, Yemen, and Darfur demonstrates somehow the correlation between water scarcity and conflicts. To talk about water scarcity, it can act as a security threat that multiply the conflict potentiality in regions with rising population, social tensions, and weak state institutions. So also, while water-related violence is less likely to occur, key factors contribute to its potentiality, including, as I mentioned, water scarcity, shared resources, relative basin state power, alternative freshwater sources, and political instability. So, as mentioned, conflict can also arise over borders that define the limits of the states. There is also a lot of cases that can exemplify how water-related issues could really convert into political tension between states. To mention some of them in my region, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, where the San Juan River had some struggles. The United States and Mexico also, they had some tension over borders. So just to resume this part, I would like to say that, well, hydropolitical tensions indicating political unrest among riparian states can rise in various regions irrespective of cooperation levels. That's a part of the nature of water and the part of the international relations, but what should be meant is that until today, no war has been declared specifically for water, which is something that we should take into account. So now that we know what we can expect about conflict about water, let's talk about cooperation versus conflict in a comparative perspective. So as I mentioned before, there was some academic interest based on the study of international water management, because they were trying to answer the question whether the water conflict is the essential part of the water relations. Some academy had in mind that water scarcity given to climate change will lead to wars. So the first academic approach about water relations in respect to cooperation and conflict was to explain why water was conflictive in its base. But after that, some years after that, it was a shift towards cooperation and rationality. Some new theories talk about how cooperation is more rational than conflict when two states approach to a water resource, and this leads to win-win results. So nowadays, the academic consider that cooperation is considered most cost-effective and ensures long-term access to water, offer multiple benefits, and being resilient to basin turmoil. So, talking about the cooperation in history, the historical evidence contradicts predictions of war over water, showing a tendency towards cooperation between countries sharing water resources. This is because the states often find ways to manage disagreements and actively cooperate around water, defying pessimistic forecasts. So normally, when two states approach to each other because a water source, what they tend to do is to cooperate rather to engage in a conflict, political or escalating a conflict. There have been a lot of studies that demonstrate that cooperation is more likely to happen than conflict in a international water interaction. But still, assessing the level of conflict over water between governments is complex because water is rarely an independent issue within foreign policy, and it's part of a broader bilateral agenda that includes other issues as security, commerce, political sensitivities, etc. So, after that, there has been some studies that have proved the tendency towards conflict or cooperation concerning international water management. So these studies has determined that countries have negotiated water treaties in a higher number of acts of cooperation compared to conflict that has been recorded. One of those studies is one called Basins at Risk, a project made by the Oregon State University of the United States, which demonstrated a quantitative exploration of international freshwater conflict and cooperation, and had the result that conflict-related water is rare, with cooperation being more likely to occur, covering various issues beyond just water quantity. In that study, it was also highlighted that the importance of institutional mechanisms, because rapid change in institutional or physical systems and international freshwater treaties play a significant role in mitigating conflict. Also, given globalization and the rise of multilateralism, cooperation has also transformed into multilateral agreements or regional agreements that extend to joint management, water quality, and economic development. However, while the likelihood of water-related violence is low, ongoing repopulation, the growth of population, economic expansion, and climate change could heighten tensions among states, specifically in regions where the political unrest has been a tendency. Just to summarize what we have been exploring in this presentation, I would like to highlight that in initial academic interest was because the forecast that conflicts will rise because of the scarcity in the future of international water management. However, now there is a consensus that the cooperation is more likely to occur given its win-win relation among states. Does it mean that in the future there will be always more cooperation than conflict? Not necessarily. Does it imply also that conflict will never occur given hydropolitical tensions? Not necessarily. What is implied in this presentation is that whenever two states find themselves into a new fresh water or a new water source, there's more likely to be a cooperation and a peaceful solving mechanisms that rather than conflictive situations. However, to make this prevail in the future, institutional agreements should be strengthened and new institutional mechanisms should be developed in order to avoid that conflictive situations could get to a higher level that could imply even armed conflicts. With that, I would like to close. I would like to thank again everyone for the attention, thank the organizers, and I would love to be next year with you to present this and new findings in person. Thank you again and see you next time. Goodbye.